Today I was joined by Ashley Darwen to discuss the biggest challenges with business scaling, acquisitions, and growth. We also share lessons learned from the past year and what businesses need to do in 2025 to ensure strong business practices, security, and are prepared to grow. Let's dive in. The man, the myth, the legend, Ashley Darwen, Group Managing Director and founder of ADITS. Welcome to ADITS Unplugged, our season finale. Super excited to have you here, mate. Been waiting all season to get you on. I know you're a busy man and I've finally got you here in person. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Coming out of COVID and, resourcing and if you haven't watched I think it was the last episode with Xavier, I recommend you go watch that as we talk a bit about resourcing. But there was a clear pattern of resourcing problems, which I think prevented a lot of businesses from scaling during that period. Do you feel like we've come out of that now and that there's like a lot more resourcing available or the right people with the right skill set? Is that era over and we're good? Is that a part of why this year we've been able to sort of scale a lot quicker on top of the framework?
I think it's two parts. I think you're right. I think that is starting to change. Like recruitment in COVID was tough. Like it was tough to find the right people. And I think during that period, we started to scale Brisbane a lot quicker. And that was one, from a customer base, but from two, the resource pool for us was a lot bigger. And it's hard to find good technical people. So I think that helped for us. But in turn, I think that's starting to shift as well. But in a service-based business like us, as you scale, it's the chicken and egg thing where you don't want to put on people too quickly because that hits your bottom line. So, but if you leave it too late, then that starts to affect service. So I wouldn't say we always have it right, but that's probably something that we learned, that we need to put on people a lot quicker. So therefore, service delivery doesn't lack. But during that COVID period and post-COVID, that was a little bit tougher because you just couldn't get recruitment was tough. And for us, we really focus on the culture side. So, in our industry, to get the right personality fit is hard in itself. And during that time, that was just additionally harder.
All right, so let's talk about the technology that these businesses might need if they're opening a new location or they're going through a merger and acquisition. Like how important is it that the technology can actually integrate, and what would that look like?
So I suppose, like we were talking about before, like communication is going to, to keep the culture, communication's the big driver for that. I think how technology can enhance that, we need to make sure that what's at the main location from a technology point of view, whether that be equipment or internet connectivity, to make sure that we replicate that at any other location. Because what you don't want is that when that location, comes on board, if it's through an the M&A or whether you've set up a new location, because what you don't want is them to feel like there's a second class to that technology. And you want to make sure that when you're using Teams, that the video is there so they feel part of the culture of the bigger location or the main location.
Yeah, and I think from a managed service provider aspect to it, you want them to be using the same technology that integrates, whether it be through an M&A or a new location. From a cybersecurity perspective, an ease of support, there's nothing worse than supporting 2 or 3 different systems for the same business because they're different location, or that might be a temporary thing if they're doing an M&A and they need to bring their software across. But I guess from a bigger picture, it makes sense, right, to integrate the exact same technology across.
Yeah. And that might come over time, first at least get the connectivity there, everyone using the same equipment, being able to video chat and be part of the culture. And then longer term is planning the integration of software or whatever that might be. So there's sometimes you can't change it straight away, but there needs to be at least a plan,
bit of a roadmap
to bring everyone back on the same page. So then everyone's looking or using the same software or connectivity or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And on the technology front too, I want to talk about disaster recovery. Obviously, it's summer in Queensland.
Yep.
Cyclones and that are pretty big up your neck of the woods in North Queensland. Brisbane's got floods.
Yeah.
Every few years, unfortunately. What do you think are some easy to do disaster recovery stuff that businesses should really already have, or if not, should really be looking at sort of implementing?
Yeah, I suppose the big thing is making sure that whatever service provider you have, that they are actually monitoring your backups, that there is a cloud backup going up at least once a day. So in the event of a natural disaster, that data is actually safe. But I suppose the second part of that too is understanding that if you haven't got a disaster recovery plan, maybe to look at that to ensure that in the event of a natural disaster, how quickly do you be able to are you in need of getting that data or starting to use it? And then, working out to make sure that that's actually possible first. And, what the plan is with your provider, whoever it is, to make sure that, okay, this is the plan in the event of a cyclone. We're still going to need this data. How's that going to work? And then what's the timeframes?
Yeah, I like the way you think about that. It's like using what we use in the industry is like RPO and RTO, which is like recovery point objective and a recovery time objective. So obviously the time aspect is a bit, you'd be governed by when the cyclone ends or the flood ends, but then obviously working out once it ends, how quickly can we get back to business as usual?
Correct. And that's going to be different for each organization. When you're looking at aged care, they actually need it during the cyclone, pre-cyclone, during the cyclone, post-cyclone.
Yeah, good point.
So it's making sure that, that's available when they actually need it. For a different industry, it might be not until the cyclone passed and they got power back on, which is a lot different. So it just depends on whatever industry. But I think it's setting expectations both sides. So the service provider knows and then the organization knows. So, everyone can plan to go, okay, well, when the cyclone's finished or during the cyclone, we need to make sure that, all systems are up and they're going to be able to access the data that they need.
Yeah. And as Simon said from Escalate Consulting, who's on episode 1, I think, is that you got to test it.
Correct.
It's all good to have these plans, but you got to test them.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure from memory he says at least annually or if there's a trigger. So I think that's a crucial point too, is it's great to have this disaster recovery or business continuity plans.
Yep.
And at least planning for these scenarios, but at least test them as well.
Yeah, I think if the organization's got a governance cycle, whether it's an annual governance cycle or whatever it might be, is that should definitely be in that cycle so it can be tested. And like I said, the expectations are that everyone knows what they need to do and when they need to do it.
Yeah, no, well said. What else would you say were the biggest challenges either in the past or even still that have a massive impact on scaling a business?
I think one of the biggest challenges for us is as we grew and you onboard more customers and you deliver services. I suppose if you scale too quickly, the internal process doesn't actually is a bit slower than what you're delivering. So I think there is a sweet spot on how quickly you grow versus how much internal process and procedures are put in place to ensure that what you delivered when you were smaller, when we were 5 and 6 people, to make sure that they still get the same experience when we're a lot bigger, but we just need to have those processes in place. So that was probably the biggest thing for us. And if as you do know me, I'm not detailed at all. So making sure that there's people that's what they do and that's their skill set is critical to make sure that happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess just on that sort of topic around getting that balance right, like how did you, like what clicked for you to go, to get here I need to do this? Like was there something that just clicked one day, or was it just systematically working through it? Like what led you to, I guess, and this might even be part of the answer, but what led you to then start thinking about adopting some type of framework?
Yeah, I think the framework was important. Like we said, EOS before, and before we did EOS, we actually used the Scaling Up framework.
Yep.
And I think that was a crucial point in time for us to say, hey, this is where we are at now. Instead of just looking at, day by day by day, let's look at the next 10 years. So that sort of set us up on a trajectory that we knew where we wanted to get to. I suppose for me, it was the biggest thing that not necessarily clicked was, having people that were much smarter than me internally. And I think that was probably the key change for me, is having people that were more detailed than I am, that knew how to deliver processes and things like that. And that's probably was the key change, not necessarily something that clicked, but letting go and delegating the things that, you're not good at, and having those people, the right people in the right seats to make sure that, you can move forward on what you want to do.
Yeah. So I guess it's like, having the strategy up
Piece.
there, and
Yep.
then having the right people to execute on that strategy.
Correct. Yeah. But unless that's documented, no one knows where we're going.
Exactly. So in terms of scaling, like, is there a right time?
I don't know if there's a right time. Some people, a business has to want to scale. Like, not every business wants to scale. If that's not what you want to do, then there's no point doing. I think for us,
Why would one not want to?
it would be up to each individual. For me, it was always about helping as many businesses as we could. From when I started, that's what I wanted to do. So for us, that was just a natural progression to help as many businesses as we can. So, and that was part of the excitement. So for us, that was always a thing that we wanted. For other businesses, that might not be something that they want to do. So I think it's up to the individual on where they want to go.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think also, like, when we talk about scaling, there's the organic side of scaling, and then there's the, I guess, merger and acquisition side. We've gone through a couple in the past. What are your thoughts on M&A, mergers and acquisitions in general? How would you go about, maybe if you're thinking about doing it, like, what would your first sort of steps be? And after that, if you could talk about any sort of like lessons learnt that you've sort of come across going through a couple yourself.
Yeah, so I think first you got to decide if that's what you want to do. If you want to scale, that makes sense, that you want to acquire or merge with another business. I think for us, it was all about geographical locations. We started in a small country area. We wanted to get into other locations, so that was a natural progression for us. I think the biggest lessons learned that I've seen is around the culture fit. In a service-based business, we're only as good as the staff that we have in the team that we have. So making sure that there's alignment between the team coming in, that's probably the biggest thing that people forget. And making sure that once that transition's happened, that there's clear expectations, that there's good cultural alignment. That's probably the big thing, because once you do that, then when the services that you're delivering to customers are going to stay consistent with what they had before. So that's probably the biggest lesson that I've seen over the
it's
time.
like that. It's like that old saying, was that culture eats strategy for breakfast? And I think it's probably a testament to our success in that respect, that we've always been really focused and held a high priority on the cultural aspect.
Yeah. And you have to, in a service-based business, the team is representing the company. So yeah, with that cultural alignment is so crucial.
Yeah. So just going back to the EOS framework, like a big component of that is obviously having a clear vision of where you want to go. And I think a lot of business, not a lot, but there's probably quite a few out there, they probably struggle with a vision. They're very much in the day-to-day operational. It's very common, and it's probably hard to take a step back and work out where you kind of want to head. Do you see, I guess, in that small, medium business space where they don't have like a framework, whether that be EOS or Scaling Up or whatever framework it is, where they're kind of just spinning their wheels, doing the day-to-day operational stuff? Maybe they're actually, on the tools and whatnot. Like, do you see that as a common thing from your perspective? And would you then say adopting a framework would be one of the sort of critical pieces of starting to develop a clear vision and being able to systematically work through that?
100%. So we got to a point, I think it was 2014, 2015, where the business probably plateaued for a year or two. And same thing, we sort of sat there in the day-to-day operation of the business, and we adopted the Scaling Up framework in 2015, and sat down and go, okay, well, this is where we want to be in a year or 3 years. And then when you look at a 10-year, 15-year, and you think that is definitely unachievable, but you work back in Scaling Up or EOS, whichever one you use, you go back to 10 years to 5 years to 3 years to 1 year, then to 90 days, and all of a sudden there's some traction, and you start ticking off those things, and you can start seeing things, and you're getting closer and closer to that 1 year goal and that 5 year goal. So it starts becoming that that 10 year, when you start getting that traction, that 10 year goal actually thinks, I actually might be able to get there. And then for us, when we got to 5 years, and when we did that goal, we had a 10-year plan. We're 5 years out from, or 6 years out from that 2030 plan now. All of a sudden, we're actually ahead of where we thought we were going to be. So, it did take a little bit of time, but all of a sudden, we actually might get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you get your leadership team on the same page, singing from the same sort of song sheet, so you can collectively obviously work towards, that vision?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's an important piece.
Yeah. And look, that probably hasn't been something that we actually nailed straight away. So, with, as part of that framework, Scaling Up has a 1-page plan. All of a sudden you put that in, and everyone's actually looking at it and going, well, if it's hard for you to articulate, which it is for me, having that 1-page plan and everyone's actually looking at the same thing, that's sort of a game-changing moment for everyone to go, oh, actually, this is what's in his head, or this is what we think we can do. So all of a sudden, everyone can see it. It's on paper. So that's probably where everyone clicks in and goes, yep, let's go and do it.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I guess with the EOS sort of framework, and it's probably like this for others, is when you sort of break it down into those rocks and those milestones that you are accountable for, and see that contribute to the bigger picture of the organization, and then being able to actually track that and go, that's where that's actually going to make a big difference to hitting our overall sort of target and goal. So from my perspective, being on the SLT, I can actually clearly relate my impact on the overall success of the company and the goals that we've set for those, 5-year sort of things.
And I think what becomes a lot clearer is this change that you can see in like 1 and 3 years. That actually is a lot. You can get there a lot quicker than what you thought you were going to get to. So
yeah.
And then when people start seeing that, they're going, actually, yeah, let's keep going. So the momentum just starts, and it just keeps going.
Yeah. So as someone who's got quite a lot of experience in building,
I wouldn't say quite a lot, but
a fair bit, mate. Fair bit. Don't sell yourself short. But a fair bit of experience in operating a business across multiple geographic locations. So obviously, we've got Bowen, Townsville, Brisbane, like offices.
Yep.
What advice would you give to another small medium business? Doesn't have to be in the IT or managed services space. What advice would you give them if they were to say they had a Brisbane office and they were looking to go Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, something like that? What one piece of advice would you offer them?
So we probably learnt from doing the wrong thing.
Well, that's the best.
Yeah.
The best teacher, isn't it?
Yeah. So I suppose it just comes down to communication. That's the biggest thing. And I think for us, all of our teams are all split across multiple locations. So even if you're in one team, most of the time, if you're in a different office, or some of our staff work remotely from home because they're not in one of our locations. So the communication is the biggest thing. And I think I was never a fan of meetings, but unfortunately, that's what you have to do. Like, we have daily huddles, and then we have weekly meetings. And the daily huddles, I think, is a game changer to making sure that everyone stays connected, because you've got to remember that if people are in not a location, they're working from home, that's something that we need to make sure that they're connected. And not only from making sure that we can disseminate information if they need it, but it's also making sure that, their team leaders or whoever can check in on them to make sure that they're doing okay personally, especially in COVID. Like that was a big thing where everyone was stuck at home, is that we have a duty of care to make sure that our team's okay. So we're not only using it for work related and information like that, but also making sure that everyone's mental health is good, and making sure and checking in like that. So I think, if nothing else, if you're split locations in different areas, the communication's is the biggest thing that you need to make sure that that's right.
Yeah, and I think when I started up Brisbane, it was critical. Like,
Yep.
having yourself and the team in Townsville to really help guide me in terms
Yeah.
of how to hit the ground running, I think was instrumental in the success of ADITS in Southeast Queensland. And look at it today. We're in this nice studio, and we've got a really nice office now that we've just moved to this year. So, yeah, I think that communication part is critical. I would also probably say making sure you've got the right people to be able to sort of execute that, especially if you're not franchising, but just starting up a separate location. Making sure that those people can have the support and have the capacity to be able to sort of execute on that, because there is a lot to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot to it.
Yeah. And you got to make sure, like you said, that those people that you put in those locations are the right culture fit for the business.
Yeah, exactly.
They have the same values, because they're the ones that are actually going to replicate the values of the business in their other locations in any new location or new team.
Which would probably be an amazing idea if you could actually get someone already within the business.
Correct.
To set up that other location if you could.
Yeah.
Because that way they're already sort of entrenched in your business practices and processes and can kind of hit the ground running, already knowing the standard or the expectation.
100%.
So obviously I touched on, Brisbane office and how we moved here sort of this year. I just want to sort of discuss more around some other challenges that we've and highlights that we've faced this year. What have been your biggest ones that stand out to you?
Look, it's been a big year. I think
every year's a big year, isn't it, Ash?
Every year is definitely a big year. I suppose for us, moving the Brisbane office, when we started in Brisbane, we started in a shared office space. We then moved to an office location that we thought was going to last us for 5 years, and I think we had it for 2. So then we've moved to this location, and we've already seen that we've got more and more people coming into our Brisbane office now. So that's probably been a big highlight for us, and I think longer term for us, from like we said before around recruitment, we're lucky that we have multiple areas that we can pull good team members from. So that's I suppose a big highlight for us this year.
In terms of challenges this year, what sticks out as being quite challenging, for lack of a better word?
Again, and without harping on about, I think recruitment is still a challenge. In our industry, finding people with that are a good culture fit and that have good personalities that can communicate, that's always been a challenge for us. But post-COVID, it's been a lot harder. So I think one of our biggest challenges still is getting the right people. That still would be for us the number one challenge, I think.
Yeah. And I think also, some of our other highlights around our cyber program that we've developed, and obviously, going to market with a Privacy Act reasonable steps assessment, I think is quite remarkable, considering I haven't heard any other provider sort of go down that path. And we've really kind of pivoted and said, not only do we think cyber is really important, but protecting the privacy and the data is just as. So, sort of two sides to the same coin. So I'm really proud of what we've done with that. And if you haven't watched episode 4 with Nicole Stevenson around data privacy, I highly recommend you do it. It was a fantastic conversation. And I think just in challenges too, obviously the resourcing is probably going to be a forever challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's going to ebb and flow as to how much of a challenge it sort of presents each year, depending on market conditions and circumstances. But from a technological aspect, AI is a big challenge, because no one's got it figured out. Everyone's got a differing opinion on it. Some people think it's going to destroy the world. Other people think it's going to take everyone's jobs. Other people think it's just going to augment jobs. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and there's a balance. I think the reason why it's such a challenge is because it's got such hype behind it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got tools like Copilot, ChatGPT. You've got confusion around what even is AI. What's AI versus automation? What's the difference and what do I actually want? And then you kind of got the businesses that see all the articles, see all the hype and go, I want it, but don't actually understand the business objective or what they're actually trying to solve with AI. And I think it puts an extreme challenge on us as service providers and consultants and trusted advisors in terms of addressing this, because there's so many different components to it, all the way down from, is your data good enough? Is it secure? Is it, have you got the controls in place? Have you got classification? And that's like even just talking about from a technological perspective, just even going back to a business objective, like what are you actually trying to achieve? Like, so I see that as like going into 2025 as well.
Yeah.
Another big challenge.
Yeah. I think in our industry, in next year and probably for the next 3 years, I think for us, the biggest thing is going to be educating the business community around governance, risk and compliance and AI. That's going to be our two big challenges that we're going to have to do. And as you said, no one's mastered it yet, but we're going to have to work really hard to understand what businesses require from AI and just making sure, we've had at length conversations about this to and from, and we haven't agreed on all of them. But I think AI is something definitely that is going to enhance businesses and that can be a differentiator. But I think this is something that we actually agree on with it, is that we need to make sure that their data is safe first before we even start that journey. There is some
data governance piece.
The data governance piece is going to be really important before they start the AI journey.
And then even on the governance, risk and compliance side and the privacy aspect to it, and the latest guidelines from the OAIC around not just commercially available AI like your Copilots and your ChatGPTs, but even your custom developed stuff. Like they've got guidelines for both now. And it's not just a simple case of, we'll just roll it out in the business and we'll get it trained on all this data and whatnot. Like there needs to be, like privacy impact assessments. Like how is this going to, like, do we have consent?
Yeah.
From our stakeholders to actually use their data to train this large language model or something like that. Yeah. So there's so many different elements to it that sort of bleed into other areas as well, like your GRC and your privacy and then your cybersecurity and even just your normal sort of business operations.
Yeah. And the other thing on top of all that, some industries have regulations around it, but then there's also the legislation requirements for 80% of businesses that we look after. There's that piece too that they've got to be mindful of, and we need to educate them on to make sure that they're compliant with their regulatory compliance for their industry, but also the legislation compliance too, to make sure that they're compliant with that before we do anything else as well.
Yeah. And just on that topic, I guess we did a 2024 customer survey with our clients, and there's some pretty interesting data out of that. And I know we just spoke on, I guess, the GRC, governance, risk and compliance, and the privacy aspect. And those ranked really highly with our customer base as the impact of what it means for them. What do you make of that? Like, do you think that the messaging is finally sort of getting out there in the wider business community about the importance of making sure your privacy is good and your data secure and, you're being compliant with legislation?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see, and I know we've tried to do a lot of education to our customer base around their obligations and also, the risk that they have, because not only is there's those things, but there's also the reputational harm that can go with, in the event that something happens or there's a breach or something like that.
And do you think that reputational harm part, the reason why that's kind of cropped up is all the data breaches that we've seen 2024? It's been a big year of data breaches.
It has, but they're the ones that we know of. I think that we're actually going to see, I think that's the tip of the iceberg. I think we're actually going to see more and more over the next 12, 24 months. And I think the business community is not ready for that yet.
What makes you say that? Why do you think we're going to see more? Do you think, is it an underreporting thing currently, or is it
I think it's an education thing. I still don't think that, and this is just my opinion, but I still don't think that some businesses are aware of what their obligations are. And I think we're seeing what's being reported, but I don't know if that's the actual stat numbers.
You see ASIC doing a little bit in this space in the past. Joe Longo's come out and said, directors can't just bury their head in the sand in cyber matters,
Correct.
especially the board. We've seen such a massive ramp up in the OAIC, which is the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner.
Yep.
We've seen a lot come out of that office in terms of obligations. This is what you must do. And it's kind of been, I feel like 2024 has kind of been the year of education. And I think 2025, my personal opinion, is going to be the year of enforcement.
Correct.
So I guess the takeaway from this is if you're not doing the right things in terms of your cyber and your privacy and your data, you might want to get on top of it before it bleeds into that sort of year of enforcement.
Yeah. And, internally that's our stance is where, our obligation is to make sure that all of our customer base is ready for that and they're prepped for their requirements, but also making sure that, from a reputational risk, we understand the risk and that we're mitigating as much as we possibly can for them on their behalf. So,
and I think that's the important part, isn't it? It's a risk-based conversation.
Correct.
And it's about mitigating and accepting those risks, but at least being aware of it and doing your reasonable steps.
Yeah, 100%.
In terms of what are our actual risks around it and what are we willing to accept? What are we willing to mitigate? What are we willing to transfer?
Yeah. And it's different from industry to industry. Some industries, if you look at manufacturing, they may not have any personal information on, Australian individuals, where if you look at a social services organization, they have a much higher risk because the data that they have is more sensitive than what a manufacturing industry to have. So every business is different. It's about understanding their risk, educating, that organization on this is what could happen. How do we mitigate it? And going from there. So
the flip side to that is that manufacturing might have some IP.
Exactly.
So they might not have the sensitive
they still have risk.
Yeah.
And it might be IP risk or there's financial risk, because manufacturing normally has higher invoices and, that can be changed. So there's definitely risk. It's just different.
Different type.
Every organization has different risk.
Yeah. So going into, I guess, 2025, I think it's going to be the year of enforcement. What do you see businesses doing more of? Do you think they're going to take on more education around the cyber awareness stuff? Are they going to, do those steps required? Do you think they're going to sort of go down more the AI, or is there a combination? Is there anything else you think?
My personal opinion is what I think will happen is I think businesses, like you said, are educated around governance, risk, and compliance. I think there's some changes that need to be made to most of those businesses, which I think we'll see over the next 12 months. I think there'll be some conversations around AI and maybe some piloting in organizations around what it can do, what it means for them. But I still think that cybersecurity is still for at least the next 12 months, especially around privacy and legislation. I think that's going to be the focus. And then I think post that, once that's done, then the push in AI or automation in an organization is going to be their focus from a technology point of view.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think cyber's not going anywhere, but I do think that privacy is kind of stepping out from the shadows of cyber and it's becoming its own sort of force. To be reckoned with. And I think we're going to see, and I think that's, again, comes down to that data governance piece and, it's a gold mine, right? Like for attackers and hackers out there, that is the part that they're trying to get to. So they can hold you to ransom and all that sort of stuff, right? So I think privacy, and not just privacy in terms of that, but privacy in terms of, consent and, disclosure and use and all these, all the different APPs and the privacy, I think it's really going to come out from the shadows and not be sort of like the second cousin of cyber anymore. I think it's going to be the sibling of cyber. I think we're going to see it become more of a standalone thing, which I think is great because I think they're so complementary. They're two sides to the same coin, and it'd be great if you could tackle both at the same time. I think that is probably the best stance you can do. And then I think that AI is going to just keep doing what it's doing, and it's just going to keep sort of probably maturing in the background. And, the hype will probably still go on as new sort of tools and technology. And I know we've had conversations around this, and I think this is probably where we're going to see probably more of it land in the forefront, and that is around the AI in the line of business apps that our customers use on a daily basis. I think when they start introducing AI into those applications, you're going to see more of a shift and
Correct.
more of an uptake.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably going to be the key driver. I think that maybe might then go, oh, well, we've got this data now that we never used to be able to get because of AI. How do we use that? Or do we funnel that into something else that can give us some other data-driven metrics?
Yeah, and I think just back to your point around data governance, I suppose the thing to remember between privacy and cybersecurity is that from a privacy point of view, that's actually the legislation. That's what we actually need to be compliant to. So I think that's why you're going to see more of it coming up, because people are obligated to comply with that legislation requirement.
Yeah.
I think in terms of AI, I think you're right. You'll see, I think the biggest change will be when line of business applications that are specific to the industry start implementing AI, because that's where all of that data is. So I think that's where you'll see some changes happen. Having said that, in Copilot and things like that, as long as it's in the 365 ecosystem, then depending on where your data sits, I think that'll depend on how quickly you can transition and use AI or automation for the organization.
Yeah. So there's quite a bit to take away from this conversation. But if you had to, I guess, narrow it down to the top 3 things that you think businesses should be doing in 2025, what would they be?
So 3 things, like we've just said, cybersecurity still needs the maturity there. I don't think businesses are there yet. And I think that needs to be a focus for all levels, especially the CEO, CFO, COO level.
Yep.
And if they have a board, they need to be really focused on asking questions around where we're at in the journey, what's our maturity, what's our risk, how are we mitigating that. I think that needs to be number 1. And I think the second one, I know you asked me for 3, but the 2 big ones for me is just AI and automation, and probably more around the automation side of businesses being more efficient. I think that's going to be a game changer in the next 12 months.
Yeah. And I'd say third one would be around the data governance and the privacy stuff.
Yeah.
I think that ties back into the AI piece. Again, it's so complementary to the cyber piece.
100%, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ash. It's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Mate,
always good. Too good, as I'd say.
Thanks for having me.
No worries, mate. Thank you.